Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going deep on something a lot of people experience, life after divorce. We've got this really interesting conversation from a men's support group. It's like a direct look into, the nitty-gritty of going through this huge change.
Yeah, and it's a change that really touches everything like your sense of self, your relationships, being a parent. What I find really interesting is how this group talks about not just like the logistics of divorce, but the really deep emotional stuff that people don't always talk about.
Right. So we're hearing from Mark, who's been divorced for about 7 months. He's dealing with all these feelings at once. He still has feelings for his ex-wife. She's moved on really quickly. And then there's co-parenting their daughter. You can really hear like the vulnerability in his voice.
And that's exactly what makes this deep dive so important. Mark being so open helps us understand what he's going through, but also how it connects to like a bigger psychological patterns. Like he talks about feeling stuck, not over his ex, but also not ready to move on. That sounds a lot like emotional ambivalence, where you're feeling these opposite things at once. It makes it hard to make decisions or move forward.
It's like he's being pulled in two directions, and it's obviously really hard for him. He even talks about monkey branching, the way his ex-wife just jumped right into a new relationship.
Ah, yes, monkey branching. It's kind of a slang term, but it describes something very real. It's like that image of a monkey swinging from one branch to another without letting go of the last one. It can feel really sudden and confusing for the person who's left behind, especially if they're still processing the breakup. It's important to remember that everyone heals differently, and comparing yourself to your ex can actually hold you back.
That makes total sense. It's easy to get caught up in comparing timelines, especially when you're feeling hurt and vulnerable. Mark also mentions struggling with guilt and regret. He talks about a porn addiction and an emotional affair that he says led to the end of his marriage. It's like he wants to fix things. He even went beyond what he legally had to make sure his ex-wife was financially secure.
This is where the idea of reparation comes in. It's like a natural instinct, right? To try and repair the damage you've caused. For Mark, these actions could be a way of trying to get forgiveness, both from his ex-wife and from himself. But it's important to be able to tell the difference between truly caring for someone and acting out of guilt or like a need to punish yourself. It sounds like it might help Mark to explore these motivations more in therapy.
And speaking of therapy, it's great that he's actively working on himself. He's going to therapy, attending a 12-step program, and even trying a singles group. He seems really committed to personal growth. There's this moment in the recording where another guy in the group, Scott, points something out. He says, "I don't hear you talking about you much, man." It's subtle, but such an important observation.
It really is. What Scott's saying shows something common in the early stages of divorce recovery. The focus often shifts outward, towards what the ex-partner is doing and choosing. It's a way of trying to understand what happened, who's to blame, looking for validation outside of yourself. But to really heal, you have to turn inward. Look at your own role in the relationship and take responsibility for your own growth.
So basically, it's natural to focus on the other person at first, but ultimately, Mark needs to shift his attention to healing and self-discovery.
Exactly. It's about taking back your story, understanding what you need and want, and building a life that feels true to you and fulfilling.
That's a powerful message. What are some concrete things Mark can do to start focusing inward like that?
Well, one thing I often suggest is journaling. Encourage Mark to write down his thoughts and feelings without judging them. It's a way to process emotions, see patterns, and start to untangle everything that's happened. Another great tool is mindfulness meditation. It can help Mark become more aware of his thoughts and emotions so he can observe them without getting overwhelmed by them.
Those are really practical suggestions. People always say, focus on yourself. But this gives people something real to try.
Exactly. And remember, there's no single right way. What works for one person might not work for another. The key is to experiment and find what feels right for you and helps you on your individual journey.
Mark also mentioned he's struggling with loneliness, which I think a lot of people can relate to, even if they haven't been through a divorce. He's trying to cope by working out, going to support groups, even dipping his toe into dating, but he's not ready for anything serious.
That's understandable. After a divorce, especially when trust has been broken, it makes sense to be cautious about new relationships. The important thing is that he's actively looking for connection, both through support groups and by considering dating. But it's also important that he doesn't use these connections as a quick fix for his loneliness.
So it's about finding a balance between seeking connection and honoring his own need for space and healing. Like he's navigating a new landscape, it's going to take time to find his footing.
Exactly. And that's where self-compassion becomes so crucial. It's like treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding you'd give a good friend going through the same thing.
So instead of blaming himself for past mistakes or comparing himself to his ex-wife, he can try to be more supportive of himself. Which reminds me of something else. Mark mentioned his daughter's reaction to the divorce and her mom's new boyfriend. He said his daughter doesn't like the new boyfriend and refuses to be around him. That adds another layer of complexity to an already tough situation.
Definitely. Kids experience divorce in their own way, and their reactions can be influenced by a lot of things: their age, personality, their relationship with both parents. The most important thing here is that Mark creates a space where his daughter feels safe to express her feelings without feeling forced to choose sides or hide her emotions.
He said he wants to protect his daughter, which is natural. But how could he do that without accidentally encouraging negativity towards her mom or the new boyfriend?
That's a delicate balance, and it highlights the importance of parallel parenting. Instead of trying to present a united front, which can be hard when things are tense, Mark and his ex-wife can focus on creating stable and supportive environments in their own homes. This means respecting each other's boundaries, not saying negative things about the other parent in front of the child, and making sure the child feels heard and understood by both parents.
So it's not about pretending everything's perfect or becoming friends with the new boyfriend, but about creating stability and emotional security for his daughter in his own home.
Exactly. And that might mean talking to a child therapist or counselor who can provide age-appropriate support and help the child navigate the emotional complexities of divorce.
It sounds like there's a lot Mark can do even in these challenging circumstances. It reminds me of a book I read recently, Rebuilding. It talks about how after a divorce, you're basically reconstructing your life piece by piece. And that means not just practical things like finances and living arrangements, but also your emotional world, social connections, your sense of self.
That's a great way to think about it. And it's interesting how this rebuilding process often mirrors the stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Mark seems to be moving through these stages, dealing with feelings of loss, anger, maybe even bargaining as he tries to make amends for his past mistakes.
And as he moves through these stages, are there specific things he can do to deal with those difficult emotions? He said he wants to get to a point of feeling indifferent towards his ex-wife, but right now, those feelings are still very strong.
Absolutely. One technique that can help is called thought stopping. Whenever Mark catches himself dwelling on negative or intrusive thoughts about his ex-wife, he can consciously interrupt those thoughts. He can picture a stop sign, snap a rubber band on his wrist, or just tell himself stop.
So it's about breaking that cycle of thinking the same thoughts over and over and redirecting his attention to something more positive or productive.
Precisely. And that might mean doing things he enjoys, spending time with people he cares about, or focusing on his personal growth goals. Another useful tool is reframing. Instead of seeing the divorce as a failure, he can reframe it as an opportunity for growth, a chance to learn from the past and create a better future.
That change in perspective is so powerful. It's like taking the same experience and giving it a completely different meaning.
And remember, reaching indifference doesn't mean erasing the past or pretending you never felt those things. It's about acknowledging those feelings, processing them, and letting them gradually become less intense as you move forward.
It's like those feelings become part of your history, but they don't control your present or your future anymore.
Exactly. And as Mark focuses on building a life that feels genuine and meaningful, those past hurts will likely have less and less power over him.
Mark also talked about feeling lonely, and I imagine that's common for people going through divorce. It's like you lose not just a partner, but a whole social network. What are some healthy ways to deal with that loneliness without jumping into a new relationship?
That's a key point. Mark needs to be able to tell the difference between needing connection and wanting to fill the space left by his ex-wife. Looking for connection is healthy and normal, but using a new relationship as a band-aid for loneliness can backfire. Instead, I'd encourage him to focus on building real connections based on shared interests, values, and respect.
So instead of looking for someone to complete him, he could focus on finding people who complement him, who enrich his life in a genuine and fulfilling way.
Exactly. That might mean joining clubs, volunteering, taking classes, or just reconnecting with old friends. It's about growing his social circle in a way that feels authentic and lines up with what he's interested in.
It's like rebuilding that social fabric, thread by thread, and creating a new tapestry that reflects who he is now.
And as he does that, that loneliness will probably start to fade. Remember, loneliness is often a sign of a deeper need. the need to belong, to connect, to have a purpose. As Mark addresses those needs in healthy and fulfilling ways, that feeling of isolation will naturally start to disappear.
That makes so much sense. It's not about finding someone to fill a void, but about creating a life that feels full and meaningful in its own right.
Exactly. And that sense of fulfillment will shine outward, attracting people who are drawn to his energy, his authenticity, and his passion for life.
It strikes me that a lot of what we've talked about today applies to more than just divorce, right? It's about dealing with any big change, a breakup, job loss, even kids moving out. These ideas of self-compassion, reframing, and building real connections seem relevant to everyone.
You're absolutely right. We often think of divorce as this isolated thing, but it's really a reflection of the bigger human experience of loss, change, and starting over. The strategies for getting through these changes are surprisingly similar, no matter the circumstances. Whether you're facing the end of a marriage or a career change, the key is to approach it with curiosity, self-awareness, and a willingness to learn and grow.
And maybe even a little of that monkey branching spirit, but in a positive way, letting go of what's no longer working and reaching for new possibilities with courage and optimism.
I like that reframing. It's about recognizing that even in the middle of chaos, there's always a chance for growth, reinvention, for creating a life that feels truer to who we're becoming. And that brings us back to Mark. He's right in the middle of this messy, challenging, but ultimately transformative experience.
He's taking those brave steps forward, stumbling sometimes, but always getting back up and continuing his journey. It's inspiring to see, and it reminds us that resilience isn't about being perfect or knowing everything.
It's about being there for yourself, even when it's tough, and trusting that with time, effort, and support, you'll find your way to a place of greater peace, purpose, and wholeness.
What a powerful message to end on. Thanks so much for taking us on this deep dive. I know I learned a lot, and I hope our listeners did too.
It's been a pleasure. And remember, no matter where you are in your journey, whether you're going through a divorce, a career change, or just navigating life's ups and downs, you have the strength and the resources within you to create a future filled with meaning, connection, and joy. Keep exploring, keep growing, and keep diving deep.
Exactly. And that's where, self-compassion is so important. It's about treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding you would offer a close friend going through a similar experience. So instead of beating himself up for past mistakes or comparing himself to his ex-wife, Mark can try to be more supportive of himself. Which makes me think about something else. Mark mentioned his daughter's reaction to the divorce and her mom's new boyfriend. He said his daughter doesn't like the new boyfriend and refuses to be around him. That adds another layer of complexity to an already tough situation.
Definitely. Kids experience divorce in their own way, and their reactions can be influenced by a lot of things: their age, personality, their relationship with both parents. The most important thing here is that Mark creates a space where his daughter feels safe to express her feelings without feeling forced to choose sides or hide her emotions.
He said he wants to protect his daughter, which is natural, but how can he do that without accidentally encouraging negativity towards her mom or the new boyfriend?
That's a delicate balance, and it highlights the importance of parallel parenting. Instead of trying to present a united front, which can be hard when things are tense, Mark and his ex-wife can focus on creating stable and supportive environments in their own homes. This means respecting each other's boundaries, not saying negative things about the other parent in front of the child, and making sure the child feels heard and understood by both parents.
So it's not about pretending everything's perfect or becoming friends with the new boyfriend, but about creating stability and emotional security for his daughter in his own home.
Exactly. And that might mean talking to a child therapist or counselor who can provide age-appropriate support and help the child navigate the emotional complexities of divorce.
It sounds like there's a lot Mark can do even in these challenging circumstances. It reminds me of a book I read recently, Rebuilding. It talks about how after divorce, you're basically reconstructing your life piece by piece. And that means not just practical things like finances and living arrangements, but also your emotional world, social connections, your sense of self.
That's a great way to think about it. And it's interesting how this rebuilding process often mirrors the stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Mark seems to be moving through these stages, dealing with feelings of loss, anger, maybe even bargaining, as he tries to make amends for his past mistakes.
And as he moves through these stages, are there specific things he can do to deal with those difficult emotions? He said he wants to get to a point of feeling indifferent towards his ex-wife. But right now, those feelings are still very strong.
Absolutely. One technique that can help is called thought stopping. Whenever Mark catches himself dwelling on negative or intrusive thoughts about his ex-wife, he can consciously interrupt those thoughts. He can picture a stop sign, snap a rubber band on his wrist, or just tell himself stop.
So it's about breaking that cycle of thinking the same thoughts over and over and redirecting his attention to something more positive or productive.
Precisely. And that might mean doing things he enjoys, spending time with people he cares about, or focusing on his personal growth goals. Another useful tool is reframing. Instead of seeing the divorce as a failure, he can reframe it as an opportunity for growth, a chance to learn from the past and create a better future.
That change in perspective is so powerful. It's like taking the same experience and giving it a completely different meaning.
And remember, reaching indifference doesn't mean erasing the past or pretending you never felt those things. It's about acknowledging those feelings, processing them, and letting them gradually become less intense as you move forward.
It's like those feelings become part of your history, but they don't control your present or your future anymore.
Exactly. And as Mark focuses on building a life that feels genuine and meaningful, those past hurts will likely have less and less power over him.
Mark also talked about feeling lonely, and I imagine that's common for people going through divorce. It's like you lose not just a partner, but a whole social network. What are some healthy ways to deal with that loneliness without jumping into a new relationship?
That's a key point. Mark needs to be able to tell the difference between needing connection and wanting to fill the space left by his ex-wife. Looking for connection is healthy and normal, but using a new relationship as a band-aid for loneliness can backfire. Instead, I'd encourage him to focus on building real connections based on shared interests, values, and respect.
So instead of looking for someone to complete him, he can focus on finding people who complement him, who enrich his life in a genuine and fulfilling way.
Exactly. That might mean joining clubs, volunteering, taking classes, or just reconnecting with old friends. It's about growing his social circle in a way that feels authentic and lines up with what he's interested in.
It's like rebuilding that social fabric thread by thread and creating a new tapestry that reflects who he is now.
And as he does that, that loneliness will probably start to fade. Remember, loneliness is often a sign of a deeper need, the need to belong, to connect, to have a purpose. As Mark addresses those needs in healthy and fulfilling ways, that feeling of isolation will naturally start to disappear.
That makes so much sense. It's not about finding someone to fill a void, but about creating a life that feels full and meaningful in its own right.
Exactly. And that sense of fulfillment will shine outward, attracting people who are drawn to his energy, his authenticity, and his passion for life.
It's like, a lot of what we've talked about today isn't just about divorce, right? It's about any big life change, like a breakup or losing your job, or even when your kids move out. This idea of self-compassion, reframing, building those genuine connections. It seems like it could apply to everyone.
Yeah, you're right. We tend to see divorce as this isolated thing, but it really reflects that bigger experience of loss, change, and starting over that we all go through, and the ways we learn to deal with those transitions. They're surprisingly similar no matter what the situation is. So whether it's the end of a marriage or a career shift, the key is to approach it with curiosity, to be self-aware and willing to learn and grow from it.
And maybe even with a little bit of that monkey branching idea, but in a good way. Letting go of what's not working anymore and being brave enough to reach for new possibilities with optimism.
I like that. It's about recognizing that even when things feel chaotic, there's always that chance to grow, to reinvent yourself and create a life that feels more true to who you're becoming. And that brings us back to Mark. He's in the thick of it all right now, this messy, challenging, but ultimately transformative experience.
Yeah, he's taking those brave steps forward, stumbling sometimes, but always getting back up and continuing his journey. It's inspiring to see, and it reminds us that being resilient isn't about being perfect or having all the answers.
Right. It's about showing up for yourself even when it's hard. Trusting that with time, effort, and support, you'll find your way to a place of greater peace, purpose, and wholeness.
That's a really powerful message to end on. Thanks so much for guiding us through this deep dive. I know I've learned a lot, and I hope our listeners have too.
It's been my pleasure. And to everyone listening, no matter where you are in your journey, whether it's divorce, a career change, or just navigating the ups and downs of life, remember you have the strength and the resources to create a future full of meaning, connection, and joy. So keep exploring, keep growing, and keep diving deep.